Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Gold Mine. We have another outstanding show for you planned out today. We got Mark joining us for the first time, and I am stoked. So while I am stoked, y'all should be too. Do all the things, like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff, get your emails when we go live, which is of course Wednesdays for The Gold Mine and Friday for The Collective as well. Make sure that you're signing up for the Reinforcement Loop, our weekly newsletter that goes out after both of the shows on the week, and we get some more in-depth on these topics. And Shaun does all the writing, so you're going to love it.
Nicely done, Chance.
Bam, I love it. Now, let's get into some intros here. Mark, why don't you give us a quick rundown? Who are you, where you come from, all that good stuff.
Yeah, guys. So I'm Mark Messina, and I am the vice president of QRF Up. Main thing that we're kind of, jumping in just to capture the org is we are a nonprofit organization that strictly works on preventing veteran as well as first responder suicide. With that, I am retired from the military. I took the early retirement in that medical game, right? Like, just be right up front about that. But did about 15 years in the Army. Left that about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Started my own company and turned into being a CEO. Didn't expect that to happen. I was just trying to be a business owner. But, and then we turned into raising capital, and you got to change titles and take on a lot more liability. It's not great. But, yeah, man, that's me. So however we want to roll it.
Love it. I love it. Shaun, how's Mountain Street now?
Yeah, things are good out here. This could be a really interesting conversation. I came into it pretty much unaware of which direction this was going to go. And I only just recently started following Mark, and by recent, I mean like this freaking morning. And so also on the QRF app, I see that it's its own dedicated IG page as well. I only hang out on IG, Mark, so I don't know if you're all over the Facebook here or whatever, but I did take a quick look at the QRF app as well. Not the app itself, but the page. So I limited my exposure to you and to QRF because I wanted to learn more about it in real time and then have some kind of authentic thoughts, as it were.
Yeah, heard that, man.
I love this. Now, I want to get right into the company and what it does, but before that, I just want to define for those that don't know what a QRF is. I want to get your thoughts, Mark, and then I want to actually get Shaun's thoughts as well, because to you guys, what does it mean? What does the quick reaction force mean to you, Mark?
So, all right. And this kind of goes into our naming convention as well, right? So QRF Up is driven from that quick reaction force, right? Everybody knows it. It's that key tagline that everybody talks about, but it's that, no kidding, there I am. Everything's hitting the fan. I need help right here, right now. And it's that immediate action that's going to make the difference in a life or death situation. All right. So when we were coming up with the naming convention for QRF Up is when people are in crisis, right? Whether it's, whatever gets them there, it doesn't matter, right? But we need something that's going to come and physically help you in that immediate time and space. So, and that's where it driven, and kind of came from on our side and what our thought process behind it was.
I love it. Shaun, what's your concept of QRF?
Well, my concept is QRF, quick reaction force. Of course, it's pretty standard nomenclature, but it really depends on where your head's at in respect to the intensity of a QRF meaning. And so, some people might think that QRF means, okay, I might be in some trouble tomorrow. I hope they show up a week from now. That's not a QRF in my books. QRF is something that is on standby, ready to go right now. And that means like boots on, goggles on, and finger running alongside of the trigger, like ready to go. Not kind of in the middle of lunch, don't know where all my gear is, and I don't have my boots tied up. That's not QRF. QRF is go now, move now, solve it now. And by solve it now, I mean like lickety split, not saunter in, take some time to think about things, and then I'll get back to you next week. None of those things are QRF. And I want to read out a comment here that I got this morning on my Instagram account. And it came from the Army Chris. And this is in respect to this podcast. And so the Army Chris wrote, having spent 7 months on 15 minutes notice to move in the QRF on Task Force 3-09, I'll be watching this one. And so we've all been on QRFs. But what I find interesting about the Army Chris's comment and the actuality of life is the longer you're on a QRF, the less QRF-ish it is. I mean, there's only so many days, weeks, months you can stay in QRF mode and be all primed to go do something, lickety-split, and solve all the problems in a heartbeat. You can only be on QRF for so long. So the difference here is, I believe, that we're talking about a digital QRF that doesn't get bored of being on QRF versus the organic QRFs, all of us, who eventually weeks, months, years later get tired of like on the start line, ready to go do things. So I like the idea of a digital QRF. That's my first thoughts.
Interesting. Mark, what do you got? What are you thinking on that?
Well, when it comes to the actual application, right? Yes, it is a digital application, but there's a couple additional components to it that involve that immediate crisis response, right? So that digital aspect is that you go into our application, you press that red hot button, and it'll go and connect you with a licensed therapist in your state immediately, right? There isn't the, I'm going to call and wait. I'm going to, maybe get somebody on the phone. Maybe I get an appointment. Maybe I get any of that. No, you are immediately connected with a licensed therapist, ready to go on the spot. Now, once you actually go through that as well, and this comes in, and kind of like we talked about that degradation of, your QRF up response forces, and it's something we're working through, but we will actually physically send out peer-to-peer support specialists to that location where the call came from or where that caller's at through geo-tracking, to show up. Right. So we've kind of found out through our pilot program and getting some of these states launched that, we need that hour time frame. Takes about 41 minutes from the time they're launched to somebody physically showing up. But getting somebody physically to you is a make or break point and a huge difference if you're not able to be, drawn down a little bit over the phone when you're in those moments of crisis.
This is one of the challenges. And to your point, Shaun, earlier, the Chris the comment that you had, I responded to it as well because I spent 5 months on QRF when I was overseas, and you're absolutely right. You start to lose that urgency that is necessary to really be on QRF. And I remember a lot of times the worst points were the travel times getting from the base to the crisis moment. And I love the fact that you've put thought into that already. But is there any way that you're cutting down on that time that you can make it so that people are waiting for less? What do you think?
Yeah. So, you know what I mean? Again, it goes back to the first step, right? Of getting them on the line with a licensed therapist right off the rip. So that really, it takes about 60% of our calls are de-escalated over the phone, right? Which is huge, and that's fantastic. Let me kind of capture that really quick, just so I don't go total scatterbrained on everybody. So when you actually get de-escalated over the phone, they're going to put you on a timer, right? Based on the metrics. I'm not a therapist. I ain't going to pretend like I can make that stuff up. You know what I mean? It's a metric that a licensed doctor actually created of, hey, they're at, 1 to 10 rate for, these different ranges. We can put them on a 3-hour timer, a 4-hour timer, a 5-hour timer, right? That goes into our application to when they're supposed to call back. It'll go off on their phone. They call back to that crisis line, and then they reconfirm their safety plan that they had gone over with that therapist on the phone. And that's our kind of check and balance of, did we actually get them out of crisis, or did they just want to get off the phone and go back to it? Now, when it comes to the responders, right, how that works is if they can de-escalate you, you go on the timer, but you don't call back, we're going to send out a crisis response. If we can't de-escalate over the phone, and you physically need somebody there in person to either help calm you down, get on a safety plan, escort you to a higher level of care, or we can't do that, and we unfortunately have to get police or emergency service involvement in. You know what I mean? They're physically at that location to do it. Um, how that works is, and how we figured it out, because we're thinking about this at a national level, not at a local level, right? Um, it goes out in a couple different forms, right? So when that therapist pushes the button to launch a QRF or mobile crisis team to show up there, it will go out over text message, email, and phone calls in a 100-mile radius of that user's location, that person in crisis, right? So everybody that's in our app that has signed up to be a responder has gone through, the 12 hours of peer-to-peer support training that we provide. We'll get that notification. And then it's up to them of like, hey, I can respond. Yes, I can't. Yes, and such forth. The goal that we need in order to get those areas up is around 500 people per state, right? Our minimum manning is around 109, but we need about 500. So, and that's where it kind of plays into, effect that somebody can show up and go do that. Obviously, those numbers are always going to fluctuate and change, but at worst case scenario, we'll always have our state and our regional reps that are capable of physically getting there if we get zero response from it. But that is why we're doing a state to state launch instead of just being like, oh yeah, hey world, this is all ready to go. You know what I mean? And when it's not, right? We're not going to say that we're operational in a state until I have that minimum manning requirement met and we're consistently actively recruiting and getting consistent usage. And then if a person, denies, I think it's 4 times response, they get dropped to an inactive status. And that's how we're kind of doing it that way to ensure that we have those responders to show up. But the reason we're at that 41-minute, realm is, and we kind of figured this out in the pilot portion, because we did it out of Minnesota. One, because Ram, our founder, is from there and he had the resources to actually run a pilot. That's actually difficult. If you've never done one before, it's kind of a pain. But 2 is it's a more rural state, right? So figuring out what that looks like when you're not traveling distance, in a city or, in a, densely populated area is a little bit simpler. But where those rural states come in and you've got people kind of spread out is where we wanted to find out that number. So, and the way that we kind of figured out for a metric of success is the golden hour, right? I'm going to get them on the phone, and if I can get to them within that hour, we're on track and we're doing the right thing. But to add to that too, that therapist stays on the phone with them that entire time until they do a one-on-one handoff with that mobile crisis team that shows up.
I am digging this already. What do you got, Shaun?
I got some questions because I don't know the app. I haven't hit any red buttons, so I'm gonna try to imagine the logic chain on this one, and I'm gonna rapidly spit it out, and then Mark, you can correct me. So if I understand things correctly, someone on the end user aspect has their cell phone or has an app, and they're in trouble, and they hit the big red button. The big red button shoots up the big red balloon of signaling to the entire network called QRF up. First point of contact is a therapist in that area. That therapist then has a branching point decision. They decide whether it goes to first responder response or it goes to, I'm not sure what the term is, a guardian within the state or whatever, someone within your QRF network who isn't maybe a professional but a volunteer. So the branching decision point splits left or right. The responding party then decides what the next steps are. Okay, that's generally how I understand it. Not my concerns. What I do like to do is look for problems. And so the first problems that I see popping up are probably more on the volunteer side, but I'll talk about the therapist side first. So the therapist gets the big red button signal. Now they're on the clock, the golden hour clock. And as those minutes tick away, those aren't free minutes unless I've misunderstood something. Therapy is now a volunteer service, which it rarely is unless you've got something interesting going on. So those therapist minutes are dollars being spent every minute that they're on the phone. And so I'm curious about that aspect, but actually I'm more interested in the volunteer aspect, because if it branches to the other side where now it's volunteers instead of first responders showing up first on scene, then those volunteers, God bless them. Like, here's the thing. If you have someone who keeps hitting that big red button, the boy who cried wolf, and 12 visits later and $100 worth of gas drive there and back later times 12, pretty soon those volunteers are kind of bummed out. They're really not achieving much, but they're spending a whole lot of money, and money's tight nowadays. So these are my sort of first thoughts of not failure, but these are my first sort of choke points of not concern, but things that make me think, So there you go.
What do you got, Mark?
Oh yeah. So definitely thought about all of it, right? So first we'll hit therapists. We do a couple things for therapists, right? So one, we obviously we're bringing full-time therapists in as we launch a state. We've got to pay therapists. We factored that out. We figured out that we need a full-scaled annual budget of around $31 million. This isn't cheap to do. All right. It's not. And it's not going to be cheap to make actual change. So we have a lot of grant programs. We have a lot of funding programs and fundraising programs that we are standing up and getting moving. Right. And it's nothing that's not tangible, right? We look at an NFL player, that's their annual salary. You're telling me I can't raise that over the entire nation? I can. Furthermore, right, 988, who got their grant, they get paid $700 million to do this. And it's still, they're overwhelmed. All right. So when they're getting those call-ins, which is who we are licensed under right now and insured under right now, is as a 988 program. So with that being said, right, they're overwhelmed. They're getting between 350 and 450,000 calls a month, and anywhere between 80 to 150,000 of those calls are going unanswered because they just don't have the capability to do it. So this is kind of where QRF Up originally opened up as, and why we started doing it. One, because obviously it's our community, but two, look at the national suicide rate across the country. 33% of it is based on veterans and first responders.
Yeah, this is it's one of the reasons why we actually got the collective started was the suicide rates, and not just within Canada, but all over the place. And it's hard to fathom the amount of people that are going through crisis in the moment. But like that many calls a month is unbelievable. The one question I had is similar to what Shaun was talking about, the peer-to-peer issue, is that eventually you do get burned out. There's only so many people you can talk to. There's only so many times you can go down the road again to go talk to the same guy. And I've done it. I've answered the calls at 2:00 in the morning to all my buddies to, multiple times in a row. And it's hard. Like it takes something from you as you do it. So I'm wondering what kind of resources you have for the volunteers, because they're eventually going to need it as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, and this is something that I kind of dive into, right, is how do we actually help our volunteers, right? And this is what I'll put in. When I left the military, right, I lost a huge piece of me, right? We all go through that identity crisis. We all go, who am I now, right? QRF Up really provided me a lot of purpose again. Right now, obviously, I'm working at a strategic level of it, but even at that, responder level, showing up for your brothers and sisters when they need you the most will be one of the most rewarding things you can do. Right? Because nobody else is coming to help us. I promise you. We have to do it for ourselves. Right? So that's kind of my first, point of that. But two, we're also working out a couple different sponsorships right now to get gas cards, right? If I got a responder going out and doing some of those different things, we're getting gas cards sent out to those, and we've got to do the metrics as we break down the states, right, and such forth. But building those sponsorships, with some of the major fuel companies, right, to get gas cards and different things pushed out there to help them out with that. You know what I mean? If somebody showed up one time, you're probably not going to get a gas card. But if you made 12 runs in the last couple months, I'm going to get you some gas cards, man. I'm going to get you some other rewards. Plus, we're setting up some different, and I don't want to say a reward system because that's not the right way to put it. But, if you're really out there and you're putting in the work and you're putting a lot of this into it, you deserve to get supported in the manner that you're putting in, right? So for those that are getting out there and doing more and being more active to it, we're definitely going to start getting some additional benefits out there to them. Um, and helping out with some of that, right? Like outside of gas cards, that was one of our first things though, because Shaun, like you said, if I go do this, 12 times, that's $1,200 out of my pocket that I got to go spend to drive, my truck halfway, to Atlanta and then back, right? Um, so that's one of the first things that we're kind of jumping over. The other portion of it is too, when it comes to responders, right? And this is what I always like to tell people. You can be a responder on the app, but still utilize that app as well too, right? Because you don't know when your bad day is coming. And I promise you it's coming. We've all had those moments, and life is full of the highs and lows. That's just how it works. But when those crisis moments come, just because you're a responder doesn't mean you can't be on the receiving end of that because you've had a really bad time or a hard go at it, right? Um, and then two, we're all on our own mental health journeys before, after, through the military, all of it. I know I'm on mine, and finding that purpose again in helping others, and I hate to put it to like the AA chips, right? But you go through these programs, and the next step is helping others, which continues to help you, right? It continues to benefit you to be better and continue down your road. Um, and that's really where I kind of put it on the onus of our community of like, hey man, if you want to continue being better for you and for your family and our community, you have to put something back into it as well, right? We're in a very me society, and that's why our society is falling apart and turning, to absolute BS.
Yeah, this is a consistent problem, but and I got another line for you. I can hear your little guy in the background
Yep.
there. It's awesome. He's just trying to join in on the
He's
show.
just trying to get on the podcast, man.
Right? He's just trying to take the limelight. I just have a couple comments I want to touch on real quick here before we move on. But Vanessa KS jumped in here, said, "What a brilliant, necessary program." Could not agree more with that, Vanessa. On the Instagram side, Archangel7 jumped in here, saying, "Sounds like a great program. Would love to help in the future." So it looks like you're recruiting already. And the Army Chris jumped in here and said, "Truth," which is yeah. So far, we're just spitting facts. The one thing I wanted to touch on, or before I do that, Shaun, you got any thoughts before I jump into something else?
It was something that you said, Mark, and it was that you're currently operating more at a strategic level rather than in the trenches or in the tactical level, as it were. And of course, that's one of the functions of being a CEO. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
So I think that one of the, as Chance said, one of the reasons that we started the collective was to try to be helpful and helpful to veterans in Canada, which then ended up being kind of veterans and first responders in North America, which then in effect kind of became global. Now we've had guests from a number of continents now, but that doesn't mean we're a big show or a big deal. It just means that we're expanding our connective network. So it all starts from somewhere. It all starts from a little seed, as it did for you, as it did for us. And the seed for me was, and this is important for everyone, not my story, but your story. You've got to inject your story into what I'm about to say. Some friends of mine a while ago contacted me and said, "Hey, Shaun, we know that you've been kind of flying under the radar and kind of doing your own thing. And that's cool, but we'd like you to get back in the game and try to help us out because we got a problem here in the military and in first responders, people who are serving, people who are out. They're struggling." And I said, "Oh, yeah, what do you mean?" I was clueless. I didn't know how much of a hurt locker people were in. I didn't know the level of suicide. I didn't know the level of all of it because I'd crafted a life that wasn't connected to it. And so I was asked to get back in the game. And a friend of mine challenged me to, well, listen, just take the weekend, look at the statistics, and then let's talk after the weekend. And I said, "Okay, Tim, I'll do that." A weekend later, I couldn't unsee what I'd just seen, particularly since my own brother committed suicide. And so, like, what do you do with these things? Like, once you feel it, then you got to do something with it. And so we started doing something with it, but we really didn't know what we were doing. And partly we still don't. But what I have found is this, that through effort to be more helpful, we are connecting with people who are thinking strategically. I like to think I'm a bit of a strategic thinker. So one of the unexpected tertiary positive impacts of trying to be helpful on the podcast is we are now strategically connecting to strategic thinkers like yourself. It's good to be in the trenches. It's good to shovel dirt. It's good to get dirty. But it's also good to step back, put on a business suit, and think like a CEO from time to time. So my point is this, that I appreciate you coming on the show because not only does it shed a light on the QRF Up app, it also helps me think about the bigger interconnected web of all of us volunteers, just trying to be helpful for our fellow veterans, first responders, and etc. I think it's good for people to hear things like this from you, Mark, and it's good for people to hear things like I'm saying right now to reinforce the fact that if you think you've got nothing to add or nothing to give or you can't help on these grassroots initiatives, you're wrong. I didn't think I could. I didn't think I wanted to. I didn't think I had the time. But I got rid of my company, gave it away so I could come and do this full time. And I'm getting by quite handily. And I'm getting by because I feel good about the life that I'm carving out for myself, for my friends, for veterans, for first responders, for everyone that I have met along the last 2 years. I feel good about my choices. So your point, Mark, of getting involved to be helpful for yourself and also help others, this combined effort is the gold. And so I'd encourage anyone to get involved in any way you can. You'll reap the benefits somewhere down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. You got any thoughts, Mark?
No, I completely agree with what you're saying. And most people don't realize it, right? Because again, we're stuck in that very me society, and they're so focused on, the I need this now, I need to do this, I need to keep up with this. But when you take that step back, right, and you realize it's not about how much money you're making, it's not about what you're doing, it's not about what you did, right, in the past, because so many people live there too. It's about what you're doing today, right? And that's what's going to fulfill you to actually be happy. You know what I mean? And if you look at it from a perspective of, I can actually make a difference and I can actually do something, even if it's incredibly small, right? It doesn't have to be a monetary donation, it doesn't have to be anything like that. Donate your time, donate, anything that you can, because it's going to come back to you. And it will. Because when you're in those moments and you need help with something, they're going to be there to support you too. And sorry, y'all. Babies and cell phones going off. I thought I silenced it, but here we go again. So, but no, and it's real, guys. Like, if you look at it and you really want to dive into something that's going to make a difference, and it's right there, right? The most important thing that I do every day is my work with QRF Up. Hands down. And I know my VC firms are going to be mad I said it. And I know that, my business partner is going to be like, why would you say that publicly? But it's true. Because building a company, building all those great things, it's great. And you know what? I love it. It's a passion of mine. And I enjoy doing it. I don't enjoy raising capital, but I enjoy doing the actual business aspect of it. It's something that's there. But changing somebody's life to where you could potentially physically save someone's life and pull them out of those moments is more impactful. And I know I've said it before, and it's becoming, I almost don't like saying this anymore, right? Because of how many friends I've lost to suicide, because I'm becoming more and more numb to it because I'm talking about it more, and I don't like that aspect. But like up to this point, I've lost 11 friends to combat. I've lost 40 to suicide. I just buried number 40 last October.
Yeah.
So I can't keep doing this, guys. Like I can't. It's just consistently happening, and people that you wouldn't even think about. And like we just talked a few months before that, and everything seemed to be going great, but it wasn't. And we self-isolate and we turn everything off. And when you get into those modes, you know what I mean? That becomes your reality of this is the logical answer to remove myself from an equation.
Yeah, the challenge, I've been down that road a number of times, and one of the worst parts is that in those darkened states, we do truly believe that we are benefiting the people around us by taking ourselves out of the freaking program, which is wrong. It's just flat out wrong, but we allow ourselves to believe it, and it is a consistent thing that I've heard from pretty much every veteran first responder that has either attempted suicide or been down the road of ideation. It usually comes back to that, is that they are trying to help the people around them by removing themselves as the burden, and it's a fallacy. So I just wanted to really bring that out in public, that it is a fallacy. It is not true. Now I have some comments on here I want to touch on, but what do you got, Sean?
I do have a follow-on to that as well, Chance. And that is, earlier I'd said, grab a shovel, start digging in the trench, start getting to work, start helping out. And then maybe one day you'll be CEO and you never have to pick up a shovel like Mark. So I'll say this. When I said pick up a shovel and start digging, that typically denotes like, oh no, I've got a bunch of hard work ahead of me. Let me draw an example out of this conversation today, and it was from the Army Chris. So he didn't have to dig a big hole to put a comment on our social media, nor did he have to dig a big hole to be following this podcast live and just say truth in the comments. That cost him hardly anything other than engagement, intentional engagement. And that, I find, is probably the best shovel a person can pick up in a time of need, is that engagement shovel. It doesn't mean that you've got to engage with all of those around you with intense wisdom and bringing all sorts of nuggets of ideas that are magnificent in every conversation. It just means connect. The Army Chris and I have connected back and forth in social media a little bit over the last few months. He's a great guy. He's a fun guy. I like him. But we don't stay in contact much. But when he's in contact with me, I appreciate it, just as I appreciate his comments now. When it becomes a struggle for people, I believe, is when they shut people out, when they isolate themselves to such a degree that they feel that they can't reach out to a guy like me. I've said it too many times to count now in podcasts. If you're in the hurt locker, if you're struggling, reach out to me. Just don't send me the freaking cat memes. I'm not into cat memes. I'm not into all the goofy comedies that waste my time. If we're going to share time together, if we're going to hang out, if we're going to be cool on Instagram, in DMs, or in comments, it can't be about balls of wool and cats. Let's do something good together. We can talk about whatever. We can have laughs, but it just can't be based on memes. And so if you're feeling like things are closing in on you and you've got no one to talk to, it's so not true. The only reason that there's no one to talk to is because you have stopped talking. So just freaking reconnect with people who you think may not be interested in what you've got to say. I love the left and right of arc of life. I love the full spectrum of people. I love the freaks and I love the nerds. I love it all. If you've got an opinion, I always want to hear it because it makes my life richer, except for the freaking cat memes. So never think that you're so isolated that you can't reconnect again.
Yeah, that is a great point. Mark, you got any thoughts?
Yeah. So one, I'm actually going to set up my AI so it starts sending you cat memes every day. But no, total joke. I don't know how to do that. But no, I completely agree. And that's one of the hard parts of social media as well too, right? And it's something that I've been working with in our org of one, like professionalizing our social media as an organization, right? Because it's a difficult task, right? Because you're not coming from a company where you have products to sell. You're not coming from, something along those lines. So doing a lot of the different like social media, I don't want to say, but like they're fads, right? Like the social fads that go about, um, and getting that done. So you're going to see a big difference coming out of the QRF Up social. So anybody who does follow us or is watching us on there, there's going to be a big change coming to that. Like I'm not personally going to do it because I don't know how. And I just consistently get shadow banned from social media. Because unfortunately I do have a mouth and I share things I probably shouldn't. Nor do I understand like the meta content stuff because I refuse to read it. But you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things too, right? Like we've got to start doing that and professionalizing that and understanding that, we're there to talk to, we're there to reach out to. And whether it's, in a state, it's in another country, it's in any of those things, we've all been down those, dark paths and different things. Communicate, connect, do it. Social's an amazing thing that we have now that allows us to connect from anywhere. You know what I mean? As much as we love or hate it, um, it has that amazing attribute to it. You know what I mean? I will just preface that just always remember if anything out there that is completely free, it's not free and it's there to sell you something. So just always remember that when you're dealing with social. And it's something that I go back and forth with because one of our big hurdles and struggles is that there are so many veteran nonprofits and so many different things out there that we are fighting that funding battle with them and they're not doing anything. They're not fixing any problems. They're not, taking action to anything, but they're raising millions and millions of dollars and going on a hike? Like what did you raise all this money for? To go do 2 hikes a year to send 10 dudes out on a hunting trip? Like what are you doing? Why aren't we solving problems? Why aren't we actually coming up with solutions to these issues?
Well, Mark,
Why are you so hungry?
I've got a question for you, and you'd have a far more educated opinion on it than I would because I've spent little time thinking about it. In the United States, I don't even know what's going on up here in Canada, but in the United States, you've got far more um, agencies and funding opportunities for veterans, as it were, far more than up here in Canada. So many, I don't even know how many. But is there a national level umbrella that looks after the strategic dissemination and pressure testing of results per annum on this subject? Because up here in Canada, money in this area, just not in my hometown area, but in the subject that we're talking about, in this area, money disappears and nothing tangible ever gets returned. It's so sad. But in the United States, the funding is immense in context. And so, is there a national asset that manages this? Because I don't think there is one in Canada.
So yeah, yes and no, right? Like obviously without going to, geopolitical and jumping into political climate, right? With Doge and everything else, you know what I mean? So there's an immense amount of funding out there. Um, and through, different political climates, right? There's a lot of change happening right now. I know that obviously we have the VA, right? The VA up front. But what's the biggest problem that everybody runs into with the VA? Well, I mean, it took them 9 months to pay me. So let's figure that out, right? When I retired. I know you're angry about that. I understand. He's like, I wanted more Milkies, and it took so long. No, so sorry, y'all. I do have my youngest with me. Mama's at work, so he is hanging out with me. He was taking a nap, but then obviously heard me talking, so
All good,
now I
brother.
get to hang out with him. But yeah, no, it's so the VA obviously oversees a lot of those programs, and they do offer a ton of grants out there to help and jump into those different programs. They do have criteria to it, but again, now I'm fighting against the other, 2,000 veteran nonprofits who have similar, ways to address these issues, but we're not getting results. And what's the metric for those results? The only thing is that they may not get funded for it the following year, but now that funding's been lost, right? And we lose traction on that. And now we're also fighting against, local, county nonprofits, state nonprofits, and then national nonprofits, right? Because there's a different kind of core structure when it comes to each of those. Also, there's a difference in what you can accept for funding, right? So if you're a national nonprofit and you don't have a state 501c3 under you that's specific for that state, you can't go after just state funds, right? But if you have a state local office, you can. There's different rules and regulations to all of it. And fighting that uphill battle, right? Because I never started in the nonprofit space. I am learning as we go. I've obviously brought in some folks that know a lot more about it than I. But and we have to do that through different programs. But at the end of the day, right, like we can talk, Doge is looking into the effectiveness of these programs. I know they're cutting around 80,000 employees and 400 programs from the VA, as we speak, and everybody's kind of up in arms and, freaking out that, oh, they're cutting veteran benefits. That's not the case, right? They're cutting programs that aren't working, and they're cutting positions that aren't doing anything, right? And that's just funds that are now being, internally reallocated to things that have metrics and true KPIs that are getting stuff done. Right. So, and how do we do that? And how do we leverage that? So that's something we're working on right now is I know you guys are freeing up, several $100 million. That's great. You know what I mean? Here's a program we can put it into, and this is what we can do for the change. But most of these organizations out there aren't willing to write out an entire strat plan and don't write out their, 90-page program plans. It's boring. It's miserable. I've written several of them now. It's not fun. You know what I mean? But if you want to do it and you want to actually make change, you got to put in the work. So, and I think coming out of the United States, right? And I can't say there's a great program overseeing it right now, and strictly because I don't think there is, right? That's personal opinion. I'm sure there's somebody out there with that job title who's doing a fantastic job, but I haven't met you yet, and I don't see the results yet. So, you know what I mean? But hopefully here in the near future, we're going to see some of that, and we're going to start moving money into things that are actually making a difference.
Yeah.
I got a question for you, Mark. It's a personal question, but it's personal in order to kind of shed light on a sort of an attitude or a philosophy, as it were. And I'll use ourselves as an example, the collective. You'd said earlier that, anyone on social media typically is trying to sell you something or there's something in it for them. That's not the case with us. We're literally selling nothing. All of this costs us money. This microphone, not free. These, not free. This hat, not free. It's all cost us. Every minute that we spend on this, every newsletter that's written, every weekend that's lost to the work is all big red hole that we keep falling into. I don't care about that. I don't care about making money, but money is a driver, and money for some people is a metric of, am I being successful in my current trajectory? So for you, with sort of a financial acumen or, an understanding of how these sort of things work, initially when you were quote unquote volunteering all of this time to try to get this thing done, and listen, I've written 90 pagers on this exact same sort of idea and it frickin' sucks. But usually when I was writing those, it was to make a boatload of money. But when you're writing it to try to make money for this nebulous thing that has got nothing to do with you barely, like it's weeks of your life that just keeps slipping by with nothing to show for it. So to my question, When you started off engaging in this process, at whatever time you got into the process, at what point did you start feeling like, or did you start feeling like, man, I'm kind of over this? Because I've gone through that. I'm kind of over this in a number of my careers, but I just kept forging ahead, and it turned into something. So, did you find yourself at some point, weeks, months, whatever, years into it, going like, forget this?
Yeah, it's a constant struggle, right? Especially when it comes to nonprofits, the burnout rate for people in a nonprofit is incredibly high. You know what I mean? Because there is no real major return. I don't get paid for what I do in QRF Up. Like, let me be incredibly transparent about it. Nobody on the board of directors gets paid, right? None of us
That
are
was
taking
evident
it.
by your haircut.
Yeah, you're welcome. You know what I mean? Like, and nobody's doing that, right? So we're taking that on, and we're, just kind of running it out and figuring those things out as we go. And majority of the initial startup was all completely self-funded by us, right? And again, that's why majority of us, we all have day jobs, we have, businesses, we have other things that we're running on top of this. Which, at the end is kind of a detriment as well too, because I can't give it my 100% focus, right? I have to do it on that downtime, that extra, 20 to 40% of time that I could be spending with this young man right here, right? But I'm giving up some of that time to do this because of how important it is. But yeah, no, actually hitting some of those walls, absolutely. I've hit several of them with QRF Up specific, right? Particularly when it comes into like turnover, right? I've had a couple people, just pick up and leave our org because they hit those walls too. And that turnover hurts, right? Because now I've got to pick up the slack and I've got to get rowing at that again. And it just doubled my workload when I don't have enough hours in the day to get it done.
So when
That
you're
was
your
big.
closest, when you're closest to quitting, when you're like an inch from the wall, what kept you crashing through the wall? What made you go right through it?
So when I hit those actual moments was pretty shortly after um the last one that we had a suicide on. And that to me was a major driving factor for it, because it never stops, right? And when we lost Kyle, it was a shock, right? And it was such a we just nobody was ready for it. You know what I mean? Like, nobody was there to even understand it. And obviously everybody's always going to ask the why and all the different things, but that one is truly kind of where it's like, man, like, I was just talking to him about this program and how I needed to get him involved and get him to help, right? Really? Really? Sorry, y'all.
All
Be,
good.
be quiet though. And that's it, right? I hit a big kind of hard point too when he was born, right? He's only 6 months, right? I had to kind of take a step back too to focus on that. And Mama got mad a few times when I'm down here 9, 10 o'clock at night working on stuff and getting it done instead of being up there to help and do that. I don't know. I guess maybe I'm just too dumb to quit, kind of thing.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, like I've been there a while. And it's just one of those things. So yeah, I keep rowing at it. I'm not going to give up on it. And, lessons learned, I'm going to make sure for the board that anybody who comes into a board seat now owes me 24 months. You know what I mean?
Oh.
Like, and we're going to take care of, turnover, or else there's going to be a financial penalty. So, hey, you want it on your resume, jump in and guess what? Like, here's what we're going to do now. So, and it's a learning process getting through it.
This is a beautiful thing when people have buy-in, especially Shaun has hit me up on this on a number of occasions to make sure that I have buy-in. But the actually what I wrote down earlier that I wanted to touch on that we haven't yet, but was external proxy. And when I got out of the military and I started doing advocacy work and we founded a thing called the Canadian Walk for Veterans. I did 5 years of that. And like you guys are talking about, there's a wall that you hit where you just can't. It's almost impossible. I'm going to say almost impossible to keep going through that. But eventually, either you do or you don't. You either step away and try to live your life or try to do something else or try to engage in a different way. And one of the beautiful things is that if the mission is succinct, if the mission is clear, right? I want to help my brothers and sisters. I want to help the people that I served with. I want to help the people around me. Then I think it'll just shift and morph into something different. It'll still be about helping the people around you. It just may not be in that particular position or in that particular field or in that particular thing. So I think that's a big part of it. Now, we're actually almost an hour. This has blown me away how fast this hour has gone. I just want to touch on a couple of these comments before we shut her down for the afternoon. But Mitch jumped in here earlier. He says, find your niche, go forth and bloom. Life has changed today in retirement. Volunteer and try to stay healthy. And this is a beautiful thing. I have the benefit of being on what's called diminished earnings capacity. So I'm on basically a pension. I get to stay home, be a stay-at-home dad, and work the podcast and do all the editing and all the other stuff so that it gives me the time. I don't have to have a day job, which is beautiful. And then we got a whole bunch of comments on the Instagram side here that I'm going to touch on a few of them. I can't go into all of them. Brady from Gray Man Project jumped in here earlier. He said a tier 1 operator says he wasn't sure he could be helpful. I love it. He says he adores you, Shaun. Archangel 7 jumps in here. He says, Mark, how do we follow you to keep up with QRF Up? And I'll give you a chance to jump in on that in a second. Brady jumped in here again, said donating time is work, but it's so much more than money. So it's worth so much more than money, which is absolutely true. Lisa Lemire jumped in. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm late, but happy catching you live, which is good to see you. And then there's a number of comments here that I don't have time to actually go through them all. They are awesome. We're going to be checking in on those later. So let's talk about it. Mark, how do we help? How do we follow? How do we do all that stuff?
Yeah. So first, obviously, we have all the social media platforms. We're across LinkedIn. Obviously, qrfup.organization is where you can find that. If you want to look us on Instagram, it is qrfup.organization. Facebook is qrfup. And we also have a YouTube channel. I'm working on that. Again, I am socially inept, gentlemen. So just be prepared. It is coming out. You can check out the podcast that I kind of started firing off. I need to get some tips and tricks from Chance and Shaun here because I am far behind the times. But maybe we'll catch that offline. That is the oh goodness, it is at grayzone.podcast. And then you can obviously just follow me too. I don't have a major social presence, but it is just at gray6_official. So that's where you can kind of look at and find everything. Anybody looking to either jump in and help us out with some donations, want to run a fundraiser, want to do any of those other things, you can find us on the website, which is www.qrfup.org. And we're also launching our actual kind of shop page, which we're going to be pushing out, will be www.qrfup.shop. That should be out within the next week or two, where we're going to have a bunch of different merch and different things too that we're able to kind of push out and start doing to help us continue raising funds.
That's awesome. I'll put all those in the show notes as well so that everybody can just click on them and they'll be able to engage directly. So what do you got, Shaun?
I have some short questions and I'm hoping for some short answers from you, Mark. So I'm going to fire away. Is there anything like QRF Up anywhere else in North America?
No.
Is there any plan to take it international, i.e. take it up to Canada?
Yes. So currently we're working right now. Obviously we need national launch first, right? Like that's phase 2 out of 7 where we're at right now of getting the total kind of continental United States. We're going to then incorporate Alaska, Hawaii, and then bring in some of the territories. And then the next push is to go international for doing that. And then we're also looking at a couple other variations because we do own the IP for the application. If we can, repurpose it and use it for other entities as well. I don't know if that's going to fall under QRF specifically. We're not there yet. Again, strat plan 5 to 10 years.
Check. Next question, and I've only got 2 more questions. The first one is biggest lesson. Wrong. I'll go with this one first. Biggest mistake you made during this process?
Building partnerships. So going into, we have a ton of partners that we work with. I think we're at like 250 some odd partners right now. And I will not detract or take away from those partnerships that we have built. We've put a lot of energy into it. And the primary focus for those partnerships were based around wraparound services. At the end of the day, we know what we are. We're that immediate, action point where we're going in and doing it. We've built our partnerships based around wraparound services, i.e., a lot of the other orgs who can get you out, get you into long-term care, get you into other, care, get you into plant medicine, get you into any of those other things. You want it, we got it. I know somebody that can do it. But I would go into it as a sponsorship goal harder first, right? Just because of funding the organization and doing that, I would have prioritized that first over building the wraparound services first. But it's a catch-22.
Yeah, I get it. That's a gooder. Second, or my final question is this: lessons. So what lesson did you learn through this entire process that, not a reinforced lesson, like something you knew when you were 20 or 30 and wow, I just reinforced that idea. What brand new lesson did you gain from this process?
You aren't going to like it.
Hit us.
Right? People are lazy, man. People are...
You're right. I don't like it, but it is true.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it really is. Like everybody wants to talk about and say that they do this stuff and that they want to go out and make a difference and be better and do all those things. Right. But you don't. Majority of you don't. You just want to talk about it and you want to feel good about it in that initial moment, but you're not willing to put in the work. And that was a hard lesson for me to take in, because I put everything on the line for this, right? I put my company in jeopardy. I put my family in jeopardy. I put everything on the line for this. And I was under the assumption that my brothers and sisters would do the same. And a lot of them won't. And that was a very hard lesson for me to learn and figure out that if it's not, a little bit past the tip of your nose, they don't care. Right. And until it starts dramatically affecting you, they're not going to get after it and do it, because they're not willing to read. They're not willing to put forth the effort. So, and that's my call to action to it as well, though. Right. Look past the tip of your nose, read between the lines and see what's really going on in our community and be better and do something about it.
That's awesome. Thanks. I do agree with that. And that is a great revelation. That's for sure.
This has been one of the challenges throughout not only building the podcast, but doing the Walk for Veterans. And it's really simple to do when you're in the military, I think, because you're working with each other, right? You show up every day, you see each other at the regiment, at the unit, whatever it is. And there's a distinct and unique connection there. So if someone's having a rough time and you're like, oh, well, all I got to do is walk down the hallway in the barracks, right, to go talk to that guy, so be it. It's very different when, your buddy calls you from, this happened to me actually, a buddy of mine called me from Kelowna, which is quite a distance for me. It'd be like a 12-hour drive to get there from where I was. And he was like, hey man, I'm in a really rough spot. I don't know what to do. I don't know where I am. I need help. And I was like, okay. And I like throwing my coat on and getting my stuff ready and like getting in the car, trying to figure out how to do that. And I was just like, I'm going to drive until we figure this out, with him on the phone. And eventually we got it sorted, but not many people are willing to do that, to get their gear on and like, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I'm going to step foot on the ground and start working. And it is it's a consistent challenge to find enough people that are willing to do that. So I love the fact that that was a lesson, because I think we all learn it when you start getting into advocacy of how many people are actually willing to put not only their immediate thought pattern on the line, but all the time and the work and putting their family off to the side. And my wife and I have had conversations about this as well. It's a challenge. It's something that needs to be talked about more. Now, I just want to say thank you, first off, Mark. Really do appreciate the time. And I understand you're taking time away from your son right now to be on here with us, but I really do appreciate it, hanging out and chatting with us. We're going to get you back on it at another point, talking about other things in life as well, because that's part of it. Any final thoughts? Anything still burning in the back of your brain that you want to get across?
No, man, just get on and check out the organization. It's built around doing the right thing for the right reasons. All right. And that's so important when it comes to the MPO space, is finding the right orgs to support who are actually making a difference and challenging what's in front of them. So this one is the right thing. And it's why I'm so heavily involved, because I truly do believe in it. And it's going to make a difference. And we are going to rewrite how mental health is taken care of in our community, and then across the United States, and then eventually across the world, hopefully.
Freaking love it. Shaun, any final thoughts?
My final thoughts are this: I wish you nothing but the best. I honestly, and I don't say that lightly. I don't say that every week. In fact, I don't even say it every month. But I wish you nothing but the best on this initiative, because it's for all the right reasons, and you've got the vibe of a guy who's doing it for all the goodness that you have within your life, within your family. You're pouring yourself into it. I love that, man. I just love it. And so I'm a fan now. Now that I'm following you on social media, I'm going to pay way more attention to the QRF Up action, and maybe we'll see how we can get involved in more than just a podcast exposure way. I think that anyone who's listening to this now or listening to this later, take a moment to think about reaching out to Mark. Even if you're not in the US, reach out to Mark. Just see what's up. Just connect. Maybe you haven't connected with someone for an awful long time. Great opportunity to reconnect with another human being on a subject that you know nothing about, perhaps. But Mark will take a bit of time, not much, but a bit of time in between his cat memes to maybe collaborate. And I'm sure that something good will come of it. So over the next few days, think about reaching out to Mark and throw him a bone.
Yeah, I was going to say the one benefit that I know that we're gonna be able to hook up right away is the collective, the network that we have built in the last 3 years. Like I was saying, we just recently, you're actually, Mark, you're our 901st guest total overall. So like we have a pretty solid network out there, and I'm looking forward to be able to connect you guys with some awesome people all over the US and Canada to get the support you guys need. So I'm freaking stoked for this. So thank you again. It has been an awesome conversation. So as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see you all next week. Chimo.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see you all next time.